Belle Haven Marina, bathed in the golden light of early morning, stood as a sanctuary of wealth and exclusivity. The yachts, shimmering under the sun, seemed like floating palaces. At the heart of it all was the Elysian, a $180 million superyacht, more impressive than anything else docked at the marina. This was a world where the elite congregated, those who had earned their riches and displayed them as one would a trophy. Around the marina, champagne glasses clinked, laughter echoed from polished decks, and private jets made their arrivals overhead. Wealth and power were on full display, tailored suits, diamond watches, and dresses that shimmered like the ocean's surface. But amidst this extravagant crowd, a woman stepped off a small, weathered boat, a stark contrast to the perfection around her. She was dressed simply, in a plain white linen dress, barefoot with a cloth bag slung over her shoulder. Her chestnut brown hair was loosely tied with sea hemp, flowing freely in the soft breeze. And with each step, the air seemed to change, heads turned, whispers followed. Mara Ellison walked slowly onto the yacht's deck, her bare feet meeting the smooth wood. She was calm, composed, a quiet presence in the midst of the noise and bustle. Around her, the guests dressed in their finest gowns and suits looked up, their eyes immediately scanning her, their faces filled with confusion and judgment. Some whispered behind raised champagne flutes, others exchanged knowing glances. A woman in a glittering gown leaned over to her companion, whispering just loud enough for Mara to hear. "Is that the maid?" she said, her voice laced with disdain. Colton Vaughn, standing beside her, adjusted his cufflinks with a smug smile. "Could be," he replied, taking a sip of his drink. "Maybe she's here to serve us." Their laughter was quiet but sharp, cutting through the air as they continued to stare at Mara's simple appearance. To them, she didn't belong. She wasn't part of their world. But Mara didn't flinch. She didn't respond. She just kept walking, her eyes forward, unfazed by their whispers. What they didn't know was that the Elysian, the yacht they were all admiring, belonged to her. She didn't need to prove anything. Her presence spoke louder than any mockery. The woman in the linen dress stood near the railing while more guests arrived behind her. She watched the boats on the water moving slowly in the sun. The wind touched her face, but she did not move. Around her, people whispered and stared. No one spoke to her directly, but everyone noticed her. Sadie Prescott stepped onto the deck wearing a silver gown and diamond earrings. She walked with confidence, her heels clicking on the wood. Her boyfriend Colton followed close behind in a dark blue suit with gold cufflinks. He smiled at everyone like he owned the boat. When he saw the woman near the railing, he paused and tilted his head. Sadie looked too, then leaned toward Colton and spoke softly. "Is she waiting for someone?" Colton chuckled, "Maybe for the next tide." Sadie smiled and walked closer to the drink table. She picked up a glass of champagne and whispered loud enough for others to hear. "The cleaning crew dresses better than that." Some nearby guests laughed. A man in a tan suit whispered, "I bet she came from the docks." Another nodded, probably thought this was a food line. A young woman took out her phone and snapped a photo. She typed something and sent it to her group chat. Within seconds, others began looking at their screens. The woman in linen turned around slowly and looked at the group. Her face was calm, her eyes steady. She walked toward the table and picked up a glass of water. No one stopped her, but no one offered a smile either. A staff member in a white shirt stepped forward and lowered his voice. "Excuse me, miss, are you with the crew?" The woman shook her head no. "Do you have an invitation?" She looked at him and said, "I am here for the christening." The man hesitated, unsure what to do. He stepped back slowly without saying another word. Colton leaned against a nearby chair and smirked. "Maybe she is lost." Sadie raised her glass and replied, "Or maybe she thinks this is a charity event." They both laughed again. The woman said nothing. She turned back toward the water and took a slow sip from her glass. Behind her, the whispers grew louder. More phones came out. Some took photos. Some typed messages. No one knew who she was, but they all agreed on one thing. She did not belong here. The sun climbed higher as the ceremony neared. Guests gathered near the bow of the yacht where a white cloth covered a bottle of champagne tied with ribbon. A small stage stood ready with gold lettering that read The Elysian. The host adjusted his microphone and glanced at the crowd. The laughter had quieted, but the mood was still sharp. People still whispered, still stared at the woman in the linen dress. Mara had moved closer to the edge of the crowd. She stood behind a group of guests who pretended not to see her. Sadie turned and made sure she did. With a loud sip from her champagne, she spoke to no one and everyone. They say salt is good for the skin. Maybe that is why she looked so weathered. Colton grinned and stepped closer to Mara. He looked her up and down slowly, then leaned in slightly. You know, this is a private event, not a coastal cleanup. Mara looked at him. I noticed, she said. He raised his eyebrows. Do you plan on staying long? She answered, only as long as I need to. Her voice was calm without anger. Colton opened his mouth to reply, but stopped when someone nearby laughed. A tall man in a gray suit tossed his napkin on the ground near her feet. Careful, he said, that dress might soak up the mess. His friends laughed. Sadie watched it all with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Someone from the staff stepped forward again. Ma'am, the ceremony is beginning. Please step aside if you are not on the program. Mara moved slightly to the side but stayed in view. She did not speak. Cameras flashed. Not at her but near her. Phones tilted just enough to catch her in the corner. Hashtag yacht crasher. Hashtag linen ghost. The screen lit up with new names that were not hers. A man in a white hat whispered to his wife. Do you think she is mentally unwell? The wife shrugged. Or just poor? Hard to tell sometimes. Mara stood still. The noise around her grew louder. The voices sharper. The space tighter. But she did not flinch. She looked toward the sky, then down to the water. She counted her breaths. She waited. She did not belong in their stories. She did not belong in their laughter. But she knew something they did not. The tide always turns. And it was almost time. The host stepped onto the small stage and tapped the microphone. His voice rang out clear and cheerful over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this special day. We are here to celebrate not only the christening of the Elysian but a new chapter in the Ellison legacy. The crowd clapped politely. Champagne glasses tilted in lazy cheers. Colton leaned over to Sadie and whispered, Here comes the part where they name a deck after themselves. Sadie chuckled without looking away from the stage. The host continued with a wide smile. And now it is my honor to introduce the person chosen to carry forward the Ellison name. Someone with vision, strength, and heart. Please welcome the new executive director of Ellison Marine Holdings, Dr. Mara Ellison. There was silence. Not the kind that comes with awe, but the kind that hits like a dropped glass. Every face turned. Some in confusion. Some in disbelief. Many in open shock. Sadie's hand froze around her glass. Colton's mouth opened slightly. The tall man in the gray suit lowered his phone. People blinked and waited for the host to correct himself. He did not. Mara stepped forward. Her linen dress brushed against the carpet. Her hair moved gently with the wind. She walked with the same calm steps she had used to board the yacht. Only now every eye followed her. The host moved aside as Mara reached the stage. She nodded once and stood before the crowd. No papers in hand. No rehearsed speech. Just a quiet, steady presence. Sadie took a step back. That cannot be right, she whispered. Colton stared. She is the daughter. The one who left. She lives in the wild or something. Phones that had mocked her now scrambled to record her. Photos were deleted. New captions began. Hashtag Dr. Ellison. Hashtag the real owner. Mara looked out over the crowd. Her face still calm. But her eyes held a fire. I came here with no diamonds, no silk, and no title on my sleeve. Because I wanted to see who would speak to me without knowing who I was. No one moved. No one spoke. Now I know. And so do you. She stepped down from the stage. The silence held. No one laughed this time. Not even Sadie. A gust of wind passed through the deck as Mara stepped off the small stage. She walked back toward the railing where she had first stood alone. Now the crowd made space for her without a word. Some looked down. Some looked away. Others stared at her like they were seeing her for the first time. The host remained frozen beside the microphone. No one moved to speak again. No music played. The only sound was the soft clink of a dropped spoon hitting the deck. Sadie's hands trembled as she held her glass. She whispered to Colton, "Why didn't they tell us?" Colton shook his head. "I had no idea. I thought she was a stranger." Behind them the staff began moving. Phones were put away. Messages deleted. The servers stood straighter. The security guards looked toward Mara with new eyes. A man in a black suit approached the host. He handed him a sealed folder. The host opened it and read quickly, then looked out at the guests with a pale face. "Ladies and gentlemen, by the order of Richard Ellison, all event partnerships signed today have been canceled. All contracts connected to Ellison Marine will be reviewed under new leadership. Mara Ellison will lead this review personally." The silence deepened. Several guests stepped back from the railing. A woman in a red dress pulled her arm away from a man in a tan suit. He looked around as if searching for someone to blame. Sadie turned to leave but stopped when she saw two assistants walking toward her. They held tablets with flashing screens. One of them spoke softly. "Your company has been removed from the event sponsor list. You may be asked to exit the yacht shortly." Sadie tried to argue, but her voice cracked. Colton pulled out his phone, but no signal reached the deck. He turned in circles, then dropped the phone into his coat pocket. Mara stood still near the bow. She watched the waves. Her linen dress moved gently in the breeze. She said nothing. She did not smile. She did not have to. The crowd behind her was no longer laughing. They were quiet. They were humbled. She had come without riches, without power, and left with everything they had once used to keep her out. Mara did not speak of revenge. She did not speak of pride. She let the truth speak for her. And the truth was enough. Mara's boat drifted gently across the harbor as the grand yacht grew smaller behind her. The breeze lifted her hair and the sun warmed her face. There was no cheering, no applause. Only the sound of water and the quiet peace that follows a storm well faced. She sat calmly, her hands resting on the edge of the boat. Her linen dress still marked with sea wind and memory. She had not shouted. She had not fought. She had simply stood. And the truth had done the rest. On the deck of the Elysian no one moved. Phones were lowered. Eyes followed her silently, not as a stranger, not as a mistake, but as the only person who had nothing to prove and everything to teach. Mara did not smile, but in her stillness there was something stronger than victory. There was grace. She turned her gaze toward the open sea and let it carry her forward. Thank you for watching this story. If it made you think, if it touched something real inside you, if it reminded you that power is not loud and dignity is not dressed in gold, then please share this video with someone who needs to see it. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that reveal the truth behind the silence. And help us bring more voices like Mara's into the light. We appreciate your time, your heart, and your presence. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and stay human.